Hi everybody. What you're looking at right now is Mame64 running on Windows on a bizarre little arcade cabinet I built a month ago. And what this video is about is how I got the effect that you're seeing right now, which is the fact that I've got two game screens, one that's all faded out and subtle in the background, and one that's all glorious and in full color in the foreground. I did this because I was just getting really bored with plain bezels, and for some reason the fancy bezels that match the original artwork just weren't cutting it for me. So I started playing around with the fact that you can create multiple screens within an artwork file. So right now I'm in my Mame folder, and if I go into artwork, I wasn't aware of this. I've learned so much about artwork. I'm used to seeing artwork as zip files, but they actually work just fine as folders. So I have an artwork folder called Horizont and another one called Vertical that are automatically chosen whether the game is horizontal or vertical. And they're automatically chosen unless there is a dedicated artwork file for a particular game, like Donkey Kong, like you can see here. So if a game is horizontal, it's going to choose this folder. And I know I've got a lot of junk in here. Most of this doesn't apply. But what it does is it reads a file called default.lay within that folder or zip file. And when you open it up, see if I can zoom this in a little bit, you'll see all of the things that make up that artwork view. And this particular artwork that I'm using for my horizontal contains actually two PNG files. One is called Blackout. I'm using this as my overall bezel. So this is the frontmost element in it. I've got another file called Control Panel. We can ignore that for now, but I've created these little images. I can show you one. I've got a weird arcade cabinet, and the button layout can be a little odd at first. So I've got a generic one that shows you the button numbers. I've got other ones for other games like NFL Blitz, just so you can kind of see which button is which, because that always throws me off. And I've got one for Street Fighter games and so forth. So these will sit on top of that. So I'm just going back to the image here, and you can see that in the corners I've got these button layouts, which are handy for players. But for the most part, that's not what this is about. This is about having two screens. So I've got two elements here in my view called screen. The first screen fills up the entire screen, and 3840 by 2880. And some of you might notice that that's a really strange resolution. So let's take a look at our bezel file. So when I open up the bezel file here, you'll see that it's a 4:3 graphic, even though I'm using a widescreen. And the reason for that is that the outermost screen is going to fill this entire area. But I'm going to configure the artwork file, the default lay file, to only show the user this area. So I've created this artwork file to have a very dark gray, semi-transparent rectangle around this. So what that does is that you have the first screen running in the background, and the visible part here is going to be much darker, and because it's gray, it's going to have much lower contrast. So it's going to be like a subtle effect. But I've got a crystal clear cutout in the middle, and the second screen is going to fit right in here. So going back to default lay file, you can see the second screen is measured so it fits right within that square. And the way that it measures out is that this is a coordinate. It measures the width and height and then the coordinate of that upper left dot. All right, so that upper left dot is at 846.30, and I just measured this using the same program I made to create that backdrop. All right, so the bezel file first declares any elements, and I have two elements, a backdrop and a control panel. And then in my view, I place my bezel file, my blackout file, and that's going to fill the entire view screen. Below that, I've got a couple of control panels. We can ignore those for now, but I like to have them in both corners. I've got my large screen taking up the full resolution, and I've got my little screen, my actual game screen, sitting above that. And when objects are the same type, so like bezel, bezel, screen, screen, the one that's lower is the one that's in front. So that way my control panel is sitting in front of the bezel. My small game screen is sitting in front of the large game screen. Okay, this isn't really a tutorial on that. In fact, I don't really make videos, period, if that's not already crystal clear. Okay, so I've done this for horizontal games. I've done something similar for vertical games. If you'll notice, the background graphic or the backdrop file is actually a vertical rectangle, ratio 3:4. And however, the user's only ever going to see this portion. The reason this is set up is because I want to have the vertical game, the outermost screen, zoomed out without being distorted. So it's going to be very zoomed in here. I think it's a pretty cool effect, and I'll show you it again at the end. And again, I've got my little my two side jobbies here that will help gray out what the user sees in the background screen. And I did make it really clear before, but I have nice black lines to help demarcate the actual game screen. And on the other side, I've got a little bit of a shadow. It's pretty subtle. It might be too subtle. And the default lay makes reference of that. In this case, the file name is the same. The bezel takes up, as you can see, the bezel takes up the full size of the screen, as does the first screen. The bezel has a cutout which perfectly matches the actual game screen here. And that's basically it. So now the second part is how do I make sure that all vertical games use this folder for artwork and all horizontal games use this folder? And basically MAME has so many awesome features built in just in case somebody wants to dig in and figure out how to use them. So I found that if you create in this MAME INI folder, every game's going to read this. And if they have their own custom INI, they're going to read that. But if a game doesn't have a custom INI, what you can do is create a horizont INI, and that means every game that's configured in the, I don't know where this data is stored, but MAME is aware of what games are horizontal and what games aren't. So if a game is horizontal, it'll reference, if there's a horizont.ini file, it'll reference it. So all I had to do is put in this little setting, this INI setting for fallback artwork horizont. And now every horizontal game is going to use that artwork file. And it's called fallback, which means that if the game has its own artwork file, it will use that. But if it doesn't, it's going to use that. And when you're talking about hundreds or thousands of MAME games, this is a great way to just get artwork on every single game. And then you can slowly build up your customized artwork collection. And same with vertical. Now I've got a lot of different vertical settings. I decided to have some different HLSL settings, but somewhere in the mix I put in fallback artwork vertical. And that's what I did. This is a sloppy as heck tutorial, but I did want to get it out there. And in the meantime, let's look at the results again. And I think they're pretty cool. I decided to just film it on my phone rather than trying to do a capture, because obviously this really isn't my thing. But I just thought that when it actually worked better than I anticipated, I really thought I should share it. So, I guess let me know in the comments if you like it, and then I can actually provide more detail later on. Thanks very much. Bye.